This video shows removing the front plastics on the Suzuki Quad Runner 1996 in order to get to areas that may need some maintenance. First thing I've done is removed the battery cover and undone the positive and the negative battery terminals and removed the battery and put it on charge. I'm using a little C-Tech 5 amp battery charger. I think it's not a particularly old battery and the charger seemed to be accepting it, and it's accepting some charge. Now the wiring loom has to be fed back through the plastic cover here, which we're aiming to remove. These are 3 fuse blocks. The ones in the centre there are the main fuse and the power source fuse, and the one over to the left is for the thermatic fan. This wiring loom running across here goes back through this hole in the plastic, and the main positive lead there, which unplugs here as well, goes back this side. The main lead there goes to the starter relay and then on to the starter motor. The smaller red one is for the ignition items, and so they need to be fed back through the plastic when the plastic's ready to be removed. In the bottom of this battery box there's plenty of old dirt and leaf matter. Remember, there's 2 bolts there and there which need to be removed when you're lifting the front plastics off. The 4 screws around the cover here, 2 up here and up here, need to be removed. To get this loose, you need to take the fuel cap off and it unplugs off that tube, and you need to take the blue and the red reverse covers off, and then all that's holding it is the speedo cable, which I can't show you with one hand, so I'll find it down here and push it up a bit so that I can then get in from this side and unscrew it from the back of the Speedo. Or it's not a Speedo, it's a just an odometer on this model. You can see the numbers there, 9,087 kilometers. So removing this panel involves taking the 4 screws out of the corners and taking the gear transmission knobs off here and here, and then the fuel cap's got to be off, and then underneath of the odometer the speedo cable attaches here and is screwed onto there, and then this is plugged in for an illumination light to illuminate that odometer. The hardest part is getting your fingers underneath to turn this end of the speedo cable and unscrew it. Now it wasn't actually very tight. I was able to get my fingers in from the side with a small gap just above here to feel for this and unscrew it. Once that was released, this panel came away up over these levers quite a distance, and I could easily get to the electrical connection here, which provides the power for that illumination light. The arrangement under here is all new to me because it was all messed up on the bike I restored. I see the this is a breather pipe coming up from the carburetors, another one here from the airbox, and I wasn't sure where any of those ran. This is just a breather on the fuel cap, which tucks down a hole in that front panel here, which goes nowhere by the look of it. It's not the right size for it to plug in there. This is the snorkel, up nice and high. I think anyone who rides these bikes in water anywhere near that height can't expect any sort of long life from a machine like this. Water must get into everything. But anyway, we're not talking about that. We're continuing with the dismantling of this front panel. And so there's 4 screws here, 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 and here, which I'll remove next. I've decided I want to remove this whole front bumper assembly. It's connected to the plastics below, and the main bolts that hold it on are in behind this shield, and I've started to undo these 2 bolts here, and there's one more on that tab down here. I just tried to loosen that one, and that's the first casualty on the bike. That one's sheared off. So inside this pan, I had a slight win in that on the battery box here, these slip-on clip fasteners here, one missing here, and guess what? I found it in that pan at the bottom. So that's a win. I bought some of these for my other bike, and I couldn't get them that exact size, so I ended up buying genuine Suzuki ones, and they were $5 each. Fortunately, I only had to buy 5 of them, but I would have had to buy another one for this one, and that would have been quite inconvenient, wanting one minor part like that. But I've found it, so as I said, that's a win. So that's that front bash plate removed. The two top bolts came out fine. The lower one sheared off, so that doesn't look particularly beat up. It still looks like it's even got a bit of paint on it. Now the bolts to remove the front bumper were behind that in here. I've given them a little bit of a spray. I don't know whether that spray will get through enough to make any difference in loosening those off, but we'll see. I'll see what else I can get on the top and leave that for a moment. Both these 2 bolts, this one and this one, are next. They came out pretty easily with the rattle gun. Hex head on the impact socket, knocked them out, cleared the rust away, and so they're off and the bumper's clear. So they're the bolts there that hold the bumper on the front. These are the front A-frame bushes, and the bumper came clear. They're the 2 top mounts here, which is the main connection to the frame, and this one was the little plastic support bracket. Went up like this from there on both of those. These are an interesting bolt with a shoulder on them. Just a 8mm nut, and the bolt's got a shoulder on it that this goes in this hole here. They are fairly tightened up against the shoulder. I was concerned I'd strip the Phillips head out of them, so I used a Phillips head spanner with a bit more grip than a Phillips head screwdriver to force in there while I loosened those. But they come off all right on both sides, so we'll move on. I think the only ones remaining are a couple of bolts in the bottom corner of the guards, which I'll go fishing for next. Okay, the last screws on here are going to give me some trouble, so I've rearranged things, hooked this front of the end up to a little overhead hoist here, and lifted things up in the air. The screws I'm concerned about are in the bottom of the guards around here, and it's you can just see it in here. It's a Phillips head that I suspect is going to be very difficult to get out. So I'm going to run the wheels off and get better access to that area. I've got my little impact wrench here with a which I will try and buzz those nuts off with. Okay, that's the front brake drum. By the way, the wheels are on way too tight. The rattle gun really struggled to remove those bolts. I suspect they were sort of twice the torque that they needed to be to hold the wheels on. So now we're clear of that, and I can get a better shot of this screw here, Phillips head going into an exposed thread on the rear. I think that's going to be a nightmare to release, but we see how we go. Just panning around the front of the bike. Again, there's the screw there that I've done all of this, gone to all this trouble to get to, but I believe they're going to be the most difficult to remove without shearing them off. These screws have beaten me. They're not budging. I gave them a hit with an impact, Phillips head impact, and it's not working. I've now damaged the head of them. Well, you can see that, and it's time to get the drill out and drill the head off. So let's have a go at that. Well, it drilled out okay. Got to now deal with the rest of the thread in there. So that's a score now of 3 sheared off or broken bolts that are all part of this, removing this front plastic. So let's continue. I now think I've got all the bolts out. I'll see how easily, I know it's not easy to unwrap this plastic from around the console and get it out past the front of the machine, but we'll continue on and see how we go. While I'm sitting in this position, just taking that bolt out, I wiggled the front brake drum off on the front left hand side, and I'm pretty pleased with what I see. There's a reasonable amount of shoe on the rear there and similar on the front. There's not a lot of corrosion inside the brake drum. The actual slave cylinder looks brand new. It may have been replaced recently. That's an original one, not a Suzuki car one. It's alloy and it's got the same markings as an original one. And the brake drum itself has a reasonable rubber seal on it. Mine doesn't have that. It had been completely damaged, so those brake shoes look pretty ordinary on the outside, but neat as a pin on the inside. So it's time to start removing this plastic. It's a matter of sort of folding it, opening up the rear, spreading the rear, getting it to come past the steering column. And because I've got the bumper off, I'm thinking it might come forward a bit easier than having to try and lift it up over the bumper at the same time. But I can't show you that while I'm holding the camera, so I'm just going to have a go and come back to you when it's off. What I have done before I remove the plastic is I've removed the wiring harness. The negative side back through this hole, the positive side's gone back through that hole, and they're all in behind there now, freeing up this to come off. So this is looking fairly loose. Well, there it is with the plastic off. Speedo cable coming up here. This is a breather from the airbox. Breather on the fuel cap. That's the light to illuminate the odometer. This is a rubber protector over the top of the fuel tank. The fuel tank's plastic. Fuel pumps here. Fuel line out from the pump here. This is the thematic fan. Gear shift. Just a front shield there. Front shock absorber. Horn. Just moving around. Top and bottom A-frames for those of you who haven't seen a two-wheel drive version. The tie rods are lower on a two-wheel drive version. So the positive battery terminal here with a bullet connector to join up with this battery positive that feeds the main fuse and the power source fuse. The battery negative can be disconnected at this white terminal. The large battery negative cable goes to the frame near the starter motor so that the starter motor gets full battery voltage. The large red battery positive cable goes straight to that starter relay, and from the starter relay the cables lead off directly to the starter motor. The neutral relay sits there alongside the starter relay, preventing the bike starting if you're not in neutral. The ignition switching and lighting and horn and kill switch, and they're all connected in this black plastic cover. Actually, this might be the CDI unit, and this is like a battery regulator up there with the wires coming from the stator going to it. So all the front's now exposed, and we can do a fairly thorough check and a little bit of a clean up. But as you can see, the frame's really just got dirt on it rather than rust, Powder coating underneath that's fine. Front brake lines are there, going down to the wheels. As I said, the front brake drums are in good nick, and I'd already tested the front brake lever. The master cylinder must be fine, because they're working the slave cylinders fine, and it's got good braking capability. I suspect these things have been professionally serviced, and they're not something that they can shortcut on when you're doing farm maintenance. But it's all been done a bit better than, well, usually a bit better than what happens in the shed. Sometimes you wonder whether the people doing the work are expert on these models and whether they take shortcuts.
Next we will remove the rear plastics and we will reveal a naked lady. Get out to your shed and have some fun.